little higher. This is a little low.
You mean
there
the
a way to
two?
go
You
around
mean
it?
the two songs? Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
Okay, I'll just slip through here.
Maybe that would be good.
That's what I was thinking I would do.
Yeah.
You know, is this yours?
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? So I'm Pastor Jeff. I'm one of the pastors here at Dayspring United Methodist Church, and I want to welcome you this evening. I'm here to welcome you and also point you in the direction of the restrooms, which are just out to the right as you leave. We will be sharing about some other opportunities following a little later. Dayspring is so delighted to co-host this democracy and faith event with Fountains, a United Methodist Church in Fountain Hills. And we give thanks for the volunteers from both the Fountains and from Dayspring who are helping ensure the success of this event. David Felton, the pastor, will be sharing a bit more about Fountain Hills. But let me just say this, that Dayspring and the Fountains, both are churches. Is this me or somebody else? Dayspring and the Fountains are both churches that celebrate full LGBTQ inclusion, that respect, hold your applause, that respect women and their bodily autonomy, that celebrate science and embrace science, that honor other paths to the sacred beyond the Christian way that we have found so meaningful. In other words, we are churches whose people attempt to follow Jesus' example and his teachings. And we find white Christian nationalism an abomination. And so that's why we are happy. That's why we are happy to host this event. One last word about Dayspring. And Robbie, I was reminded of this when you told me you were a Baptist from Mississippi. In 1963, 28 Methodist ministers signed a document called Born of Conviction that pleaded with church and society to be more welcoming and empowering of African American folks. And of those 28 Methodist ministers who signed that public declaration, 22 were forced out of the state. And friends, you've probably heard some of the stories. Crosses were burned in their yards, their tires were slashed, their kids were bullied at school. They were all but chased out of town. One of those pastors was Bufkin Oliver. God, you gotta love that name, Bufkin Oliver. And he landed in Tempe to found a church that would become Dayspring United Methodist Church. So that is in our DNA here, and that's why we're so happy to co-host this event. Friends, I would like to introduce our special musical guests this evening. Solo recording artist and member of Paper Horses, Taylor Leonhardt. Dove Award-winning singer-songwriter, Fernando Ortega. and Grammy Award-winning producer and singer-songwriter Tommy Sims.
I'm going to start with a song that I wrote for an Amish farmer named Samuel Fisher. I met him in Pennsylvania. He built a chest of drawers for me and my wife, and he and I exchanged cards for quite a while after we met, and I decided to write a hymn based on my experience visiting his farm. I was hoping to be the first Mexican to make it into the Amish hymnal because it's all a bunch of Germans, but it still hasn't happened yet, but anyway. Children of the living God, come and sing, sing out loud. Children of the living God, sing to the living God. Sing of the wonders he has made, bird in flight, falling rain. Sing of the wonders he has made, sing to the living God. How he loves us with great love, he who sits enthroned above. For our lives he spilled his blood, sent his spirit like a flood. Children of the living God, sing to the living God. Sing of his gentle healing hands, how they found the lowliest man. Sing of his gentle healing hands, sing to the living God. Sing of the mercy that he gives, though we sin, he forgives. Sing of the mercy that he gives, sing to the living God. How he loves us with great love, he who sits enthroned above. For our lives he spilled his blood, sent his spirit like a flood. Children of the living God, sing to the living God. Sing for the morning when he comes in the clouds, glorious sun. Sing for the morning when he comes, sing to the living God. How he loves us with great love, he who sits enthroned above. For our lives he spilled his blood, sent his spirit like a flood. Children of the living God, sing to the living God. Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias. And my next song is I wrote for my grandfather, who lived to be 102 years old. He died in 1991. He was a farmer and a weaver, very good at both. Some of his weavings hang in the Smithsonian Institution in the Museum of American History. I learned more about what it is to be a Christian from him than anybody I can think of in my whole life. He and my grandmother, that they expressed their love for God and their worship for God in the work of their hands, the way they treated their neighbors and the way they raised their family and the way he kept his farm. This song is called Mi Abuelito, which means my grandpa. In Spanish, abuelo is grandfather. Abuelito is like a less formal term. The The moon is shining on the Pecos Mountains like a blue and silver dream. And far away below the moonlit mountains, you are standing in your field. You are an old man, the earth is in your voice and in the songs that spill from your memory. A shovel in your old hand, dark water in the furrowed rows. You sing our lives as they used to be, mi abuelito. Tomorrow morning we will carry you beyond the village to a stony hill and rest you there beside your brightest blanket. Leaves and diamonds that you wove last year. Then with our song we will call for the summer stars to fill the sky like a silver dream. How we will sing as we hold on to the memory of your earthen voice on the moonlit field, mi abuelito. En los cielos, cantando entre la luna y las estrellas, mi abuelito. En los cielos, cantando entre la luna y las estrellas.
Hey guys, I'm Taylor, and I was realizing like we got some award winners up here, and I forgot to let y'all know that I did win my elementary school spelling bee. So that's my major award winner. I'm just kidding, but really, I say that because it's just kind of when I got the invitation to come, I'm like, are you sure you meant me? Like, did you get the right Taylor? I don't know. I'm just honored to be here. That's the point. And I love when the scripture says one way we encourage one another is like sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. And so I'm going to start out with not a song of my own, but Bono I thought would do the trick today. So if you know it, sing along. Is it getting better? Or do you feel the same? Will it make it easier on you now? If you got someone to blame, you say one love, one life. When it's one need in the night, one love, we get to share it. It leaves you, baby, if you don't care for it. Did I disappoint you or leave a bad taste in your mouth? You act like you never had love. You want me to go without. Well, it's too late tonight to drag the past out into the light. We are one, but we're not the same. We get to carry each other, carry each other. Whoa. Have you come here for forgiveness? Have you come to raise the dead? Have you come here to play Jesus to the lepers in your head? Did I ask too much? More than a lie? You gave me nothing, now it's all I got. We are one, but we're not the same. Well, we hurt each other, then we do it again. You say love is a temple, love a higher law. Love is a temple, love the higher law. You ask me to enter, and then you make me crow. But I can be holding on to what you got when all you got is hurt. One love, one blood, one life. You gotta do what you should. One life with each other, sisters, brothers. One life, but we're not the same. We get to carry each other, carry each other. Let's sing that together. One life, but we're not the same. We get to carry each other, carry each other. One more time. One life, but we're not the same. We get to carry each other, carry each other. Well, thank you. Thanks, y'all. Kind of, you have these days in your life where the unthinkable thing that you think, that will never happen to me or anywhere close to where I live, right? Like, that's just something you see on the news, and it's sad, and you feel sad about it for a few days, and then you forget all about it. And that thing happened to my community in Nashville, and we had a shooting at the school where several of my friends send their kids. And I just like still viscerally remember my phone going off in the studio that day, and kind of, you know, it had been on silent, and then all of a sudden these things are coming in, and it was like life was kind of not the same for us after that. And yeah, as a songwriter, it's like, what do you do? What can you say? All I know is that it was hard to sing anything after that. But I would kind of, I'm not really a pianist at all. But I would, there's one in the basement of the church where I go, and I would kind of go down there and just, I would play the song, kind of work on this song. And so this is just a song for those kind of days. I know every generation says the world's getting worse, and we shudder in the shadow of the valley of the curse, where the night's growing darker and the earth's getting warm, and the heart gets harder and the locusts swarm. But if we ever get to heaven, what's she gonna do? I think it's too much singing for a boy like you. There go the 10 o'clock sirens, a couple howling wolves, and everybody keeps sighing. There goes the neighborhood where the death toll's climbing, and the sky's heating up, and the heart gets harder so it don't get crushed. But if we ever get to heaven, what's she gonna say? Jesus, I reckon you slept in that day. Hey. How many doves you gonna slaughter? How many graves we gonna dig? How many thoughts and prayers will you offer before you admit it was never for the children? But there's wars to be won, and there's ground to be gained in the name of the holy kingdom of the gun. But if you ever get to heaven, take a look around the place. God took your AK-47s and he turned them into space. And he's been planting some lilies in the killing fields, while we're all still waiting for our wounds to heal. If we ever get to heaven, ooh, if we ever get to heaven, oh, if we ever get to heaven, ooh, if we ever get to heaven.
So I drew the short stick. I got to follow these two. Amazing, beautiful, beautiful songs. Mr. Fernando Ortega, was it just, man, I'm blown away. And Taylor, we got to be together last week. You're still singing beautiful songs. Yeah, fantastic. And I wouldn't, you kind of look, I kind of feel like I wouldn't want to go up against you in a spelling bee. You know? I feel like that.
You don't want to crash me?
I feel that way. Just, honored to be here and be in this discussion. Let's see, I'll try this one. This is a thought that I wake up with often. Which way are you going? Which side will you be on? Will you stand and watch while all the seeds of hate are sown? Will you stand with those who say, let his will be done? With one hand on the Bible and one hand on the gun, one hand on the Bible, one hand on the gun. Which way are you looking? Isn't it hard to see? And do you say what's wrong for him is not wrong for me? The lines, they change and they rearrange. What do we become when all the olive branches turn to spears and the flowers turn to stone? The olive branches turn to spears and the flowers turn to stone. And every day things keep changing, and the words once honored are turned to lies. And people wondering, and can you blame them? It's too far to run and too late to hide. So now you turn your back on all the things we used to teach. See, now it's let that man live in freedom, but only if he lives like me. We walk the streets of righteousness, and yet we just can't understand, no. Say we love the baby, then crucify the man. Say we love the baby, then crucify the man. I don't understand. Say we love the baby, then crucify the man. Yeah. The baby. The man. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's an old Jim Croce song. I started learning about Jim Croce as a kid. 8-year-old kid growing up on the south side of Chicago. And Croce wasn't a guy that we would just see walking down the streets in our neighborhood. You know? So I was always intrigued. I guess it was guys like him that got me into first loving songs like these that I call them the people songs, you know. And then as I got older, I started trying to write some of these kinds of songs myself. Here's one about faith. Hard is the way you've been traveling, no guiding light and no clue. And when you speak out to that mountain, did that make it move? Well, the heart is the way that you get there. Believe because what's left to do. And when time is far spent in this desert, faith comes to find you. It'll grow strong like the tallest tree, roots in the water, buried so deep. It don't take much, just the smallest degree. Sometimes it comes down to the mustard seed. Sometimes it comes down to the mustard seed. Well, we've all been there in the struggle. Yeah, we've all got the wounds that don't heal. Sir, we all fall into the fire, fight through the fear. But anything is possible. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. When you believe, and it'll grow strong like the tallest tree. We'll be all right down on our knees. Won't take much, just the smallest degree. Sometimes it comes down to the mustard seed. Sometimes it comes down to the mustard seed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Taylor, Fernando, and Tommy. You'll be happy to know that after our conversation tonight, we'll be hearing another set from all three musicians. But let's hear it again for this great, amazing music. I'm David Felton, pastor at the Fountains United Methodist in Fountain Hills, and we have been thrilled to be a part of co-sponsoring and helping organize tonight's event. It has been a joy to work with the staff at Dayspring and the amazing staff at PRRI, which you'll hear more about from Robbie in just a minute. It has been great, and I trust that you all will go away tonight having a sense of what an incredible, unspoken organizational behemoth we've been working with here. You guys are awesome, so thank you for all that you've done to make this happen today. The next part of our evening is a conversation from the co-hosts of The Convocation Unscripted. It's a podcast that tonight is going to be the Convocation Unleashed, I guess we could say. So tonight's speakers will be taking questions, so you're going to want to think about what those questions might be as we go along, and the panelists will give you some instructions in a few minutes about how you can get those questions to them. It's actually a text. You can text them your question, and that number is in your program. You'll get a few more details on that in a second. But first, I'd like to introduce you to our contestants tonight. So, Diana Butler Bass, come on down. You're the next contestant. It doesn't say this here, but it should say, instead of an award-winning author, popular speaker, inspiring preacher, and one of America's most trusted commentators on religion and contemporary spirituality, she's a Phoenician. She went to Saguaro High School. Yeah.
Class of 77, homecoming princess and student government.
Oh, excellent. And also, weren't you the president of the Republican Club? What
You're
was
not
it?
supposed to say that, but yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right.
Teenage Republican of the Year, 1976. Frame letter from Barry Goldwater to prove it.
All right. It's enshrined on your wall.
It is actually.
Yeah.
My
Gold
daughter
leaf.
looks at it all the time and she says, "Mom, I can't believe this is you."
Yeah. Diana's most recent book, Freeing Jesus, has been described as a book on the heart of Christianity, inviting, accessible, provocative, challenging, and always inspiring. She holds a PhD in religious studies from Duke University and is the author of 11 books. She writes the Cottage newsletter on Substack. How many of you here are subscribed to the Cottage newsletter? Look at all those fans out there. That's amazing. Great. And our next contestant from Calvin College, Kristen Dumais. Kristen is a New York Times best-selling author and professor of history and gender studies at Calvin University. She holds a PhD from the University of Notre Dame, and her most recent book is Jesus and John Wayne: How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation. Well, it sounds like from your reaction you know that what my paper says here, it has become an instant must-read classic in the field, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
And it's a book that I hated because it took me 3 months to read it because I could only read a page and a half, and then I would have to get up and stomp around or take a walk around the block because it made me so mad. So thank you for that, Kristen. Yes, thank you. Got a lot of exercise out of your book. So she writes the Connections newsletter on Substack. And next up, Robert P. Jones.
Whoa.
Robbie is the president and founder of Public Religion Research Institute. See, I got that because it's written out there.
Nice.
Yeah. Otherwise known as PRRI, and the New York Times best-selling author of The Hidden Roots of White Supremacy and the Path to a Shared American Future, which the New York Times called full of urgency and insight and a compelling and necessary undertaking. Robbie holds a PhD in religion from Emory University. He writes the White Too Long newsletter on Substacks. Robbie Jones. And yet another New York Times best-selling author, Jemar Tisby, is our final contestant. how many of you heard Jamar preach this morning? He was okay? All right. Jamar is professor of history at Simmons College of Kentucky, who speaks nationwide on the topics of racial justice, U.S. history, and Christianity. His latest book, The Spirit of Justice, True Stories of Faith, Race, and Resistance, reveals the stories of the people who fought against racism and agitated for justice, and what we can learn from their example, their suffering, their methods, and their hope. He also writes the Footnotes newsletter on Substack. Ladies and gentlemen, Jemar Tisby. And the Convocation Unleashed.
All right, the convocation cometh. We're happy to be here. So what are we doing here? Pastor Jeff outed me as a Southern Baptist from Mississippi this morning, and I almost feel like we could just give the invitation right now. Right after this music, all the Baptists in the audience got that joke. So what are we doing here? So we have sort of found each other as kind of fellow travelers, authors, writers, scholars. Three amazing historians and kind of a wannabe historian here. But we're here tonight, I think, because really over the last decade we have been experiencing both a crisis of democracy and a test of our faith. And we're here to really talk about that connection tonight. And really how Christianity, we're in a Christian space, right? How Christianity has been leveraged to support an anti-democratic and authoritarian movement. And I got to say, Jeff, I did not think I would hear the word abomination tonight. That's a strong word. We don't hear it from the progressive side that often, but I appreciate that word. An abomination, right? Something that distorts our faith, distorts democracy. And so we're going to talk about that tonight. We also want to confess, along with, I think, your story about the pastor coming from my home state and landing here because he could not live out his faith that was committed to the equality of all people in that state, right? In my home state. It's a kind of telling trajectory of kind of where we are. And part of what I think we're wanting to do is to have that right out front and confess that Christianity has had a fairly ambivalent and at times like antagonistic relationship with democracy, particularly if we're talking about a pluralistic democracy, one that truly believes in the equality of all people, regardless of race, regardless of religion. So we want to bring that confession, I think, into the space tonight and kind of hold that up. But we're also here tonight, I think, as we already have heard from these amazing musicians that have been with us, sharing their gifts with us, that we are here to hold up a different version of Christianity tonight, something different. And one of the things I think about just having this event is just having people in the same space, right, that are willing to affirm this different version that is often the kind of minor key that we hear, and not the major key that we hear out in the public. But I thought I would just kind of hold up some themes that we heard already in the music. God of mercy, healing love, children of the living God. We carry each other. One love, sisters and brothers. Will you stand by while the seeds of hate are sown? And finally, I love this ending that Tommy brought us home with. Sometimes it comes down to the mustard seed. Anything is possible if you believe. And I think sometimes when we feel outnumbered and we feel discouraged, like that little bit of hope, I think is really, really important. And the version, as I was summarizing it, that we're kind of holding up here, really, it's kind of four things that came to my mind, just to kind of set the table here, is a version of Christianity that holds up love instead of fear, equality rather than hierarchy, pluralism rather than dominion, and truth rather than propaganda. Like this is a version of Christianity we're holding up. One thing before I kind of open it up here, I just want to kind of also note that we are here in a church. We are here and we are going to honor church and state separation. We're going to honor the Johnson Amendment here, so you will not hear any politicking or talking about who's elected for office, but we are going to talk about the things that really matter for our shared life together and our democracy here. And I'm going to, with that, just kind of turn it over to our Convocation Unscripted team and ask you, what are we doing here together tonight?
Well, you know, sometimes when we're doing Convocation Unscripted, we start with this question about how we're feeling, and this is a really interesting place for me to be. Obviously, it's a place where my parents moved in 1972, and we came from Maryland, and so I can remember it was right after the election of 1972 that we got into a Ford station wagon in Baltimore City and drove all the way across the United States, 3 kids and a dog and my 2 parents, and came here. And I remember when we pulled down Montebello Avenue over next to Mojave Elementary School in Scottsdale and looking at Camelback Mountain and seeing this landscape and this place that I had never seen before. And the feelings that conjured up for me, both the learning to love a space that was so different than the trees and the rivers and all of the water that there is in Maryland. Maryland, I've figured out over my adult life, where I now live in Northern Virginia, is a place that cannot be understood separate from its rivers. And yet I grew up in a place that could not be understood separate from its deserts. And so the reason I start there is because when you encounter a new landscape, when you see something you've never seen before, there's all kinds of responses that you have to that. And so you asked me, you know, why you know, we're here tonight. I guess maybe it was that experience when I was 13 years old that has shaped my entire life as a writer, as a thinker, as a preacher, as a teacher. And that is, you can fear new landscapes, or you can learn to listen to what they teach you. And that metaphor isn't just about our physical journeys through space, of course, or our spiritual journeys, but is also, I think, really right now about the political environment and the political issues that we're facing. And so the way that I kind of want to say, what am I doing here tonight? I don't know in some senses, because I'm so tired. I've been on the road since mid-September talking about all of these issues: faith and democracy, Christian nationalism, the threats to the future. And I've been receiving questions from all of these places I've been, in Western Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and West Missouri, and Robbie and I have been together basically on the road this whole week, and we've been in 4 different cities talking about all these things. And everybody is saying, I'm so afraid and I'm so exhausted. And then they look at me and they say, can you help me? It's like, you have no idea how afraid and how exhausted I am. But then I thought back today. I took Robbie up to where I grew up, showed him the street and house where I lived as a teenager. And I thought about that journey. And when we turned down that street in that Ford station wagon in 1972, I was afraid and exhausted. We just driven all the way across the country, and there was this new land, and I had no idea how to live there. And maybe that's what I'm doing here today. To remind myself that every journey involves fear and exhaustion. And then to reach out my arms and remind all you of the same thing. Every journey involves fear and exhaustion. But it doesn't mean that the journey's over when you're afraid or exhausted. It just means you sort of pick up and you move into the new landscape and you learn to live in a new way. And so I think that's why I'm here, at least, is to try to help people get their footing in the midst of all of this.
It's beautiful. Good evening. How's everybody doing? Thank you for coming, listening to us talk at you, but don't worry, you'll have a chance to ask us questions, so please be thinking about that. Why I'm here is similar. I said this morning a couple of things. One, I'm here to encourage you but selfishly, I need to be encouraged. And I said that, you know, if there's one word that characterized my feelings in this moment, it's the word uncertainty. Uncertainty. Not sure what's coming, but this feeling of dread, like it's probably not going to be good. and it reminded me of something that I heard somewhere, I don't know, but I've never forgotten the phrase. Sometimes you have to borrow courage. Sometimes you have to borrow courage. And that's when we don't necessarily have it in ourselves, but we lean on community, we lean on faith, we even lean on history. As a historian, I got to throw this in there. So, when it comes to uncertainty about this democratic project, black folk know something about uncertainty. I got to be honest, I'm concerned that even sort of progressive Christian circles, when we feel this uncertainty and when we need to borrow this courage, we're still sort of skirting around and skipping over the black Christian tradition. And there's so much to learn, even simply historically. I think back to Dred Scott. He was born enslaved, and at a certain point during his adult life, his enslaver brought him from a slave state to a free state temporarily, and then they went back to a slave state. And Dred Scott was sitting there and it's like, hey, we crossed state lines to a free state. Which, by the way, I'm just thinking of this now. Taking a controversial issue and putting it back to the states doesn't solve the problem. So he takes his case and he sues and says, I should be free because we were in a free state. And of course, this goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, and it's the Dred Scott v. Sanford decision in the 1850s. And what the reasoning was in that court case was so interesting. The judge didn't judge it on the merits of whether he went to a slave state or free state, whether he should be free. The judge said that an enslaved person is not a citizen, therefore has no standing to bring a court case. And it took a civil war, it took the 13th Amendment to emancipate the enslaved people, and it took the 14th Amendment, which said all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens, to even count black people as citizens. And then it took the 15th Amendment that said the right to vote couldn't be abridged because of creed, race, or previous condition of servitude. It took another amendment just to get women in the fold. So when you talk about uncertainty in politics, uncertainty in democracy, there are people who have been here before. And what can we learn from them? And it brought to mind this verse from Scripture, because it's not the fact of being black or how much melanin we have in our skin that gives us some wisdom in these uncertain times. I think it's this. This comes from the book of Romans. Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit. I like to call the Holy Spirit sometimes the Spirit of justice, who has been given to us. And so as we think about these uncertain times, as we think about the need to borrow courage, look to those who have suffered, persevered, developed character, and in the most crushing of circumstances still have hope.
So I have known Jamar for a long time now, and I learned very early on to always try to position myself to never have to follow him. But here we are. I am coming into this place, I'm going to be honest, pretty raw. Pretty raw. I am hitting the wall. Just ask my husband. We've had multiple conversations just in the last week where I've just kind of just poured things out to him, and he just listens and hears it, takes it in, and it's a lot right now. It's a lot. I'm tired. I find myself, heading to the airport a lot, getting on a plane, saying goodbye to my family. I find myself cutting it a little bit closer every time because I just don't want to say goodbye to my kids one more time. This last time I didn't even tell you, Robbie, it was a little close. Got that Starbucks drink and it was almost the death of me, but I made it on the flight, I cut it super close. I'm tired. And I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated because we've been in this fight for a while now. Yeah. Weeks of intensity on the road, months, years now. When I first started writing more publicly, several years ago, almost a decade ago, very early on I got a message from another professor at a Christian college. I didn't know them, but they saw what I was doing and they wrote me and said, "Are you going rogue?" The assumption being, right, my time was limited. Like, I can't be doing this with permission. All I was doing was telling the truth. But inside Christian spaces, there's this assumption, there's this knowledge that there are things that you don't say. And you better watch your back. Are you going rogue? I was like, well, I don't know. Before I published Jesus and John Wayne, a colleague asked me, "Is this book going to get you fired?" I said, "I don't know. I guess we'll find out." Right? And again, you have to tell the truth. And then I thought, what can these guys do to me? Yes, there were attempts to get me fired. So far, so good on that front. And then there's we take our hits on social media. If you're out in that space, you'll see that. But, what can they really do? And then I started to see these coalitions coming together, connections between people I had studied for years. I knew who these people were, seeing them come together, unify together, big funders, political, religious, right? And I watched this happen and I thought, oh, this is not good. And a few months ago, I had to have a conversation with my husband and tell him what I knew and what I saw. And I said, "I'm so sorry. You all did not sign up for this. But I have stuck my neck out, and here we are." And even a few months ago, I had to make a choice. Like, things weren't looking good midsummer, if you recall. Right? Do I pull back or do I lean in? And there's really only one choice I could make. I need to lean in. I need to lean in. And so I've been on the road. We've all been on the road, and we're talking with you all. And not to say that we have it rough. That's what has already been said. I cannot iterate this enough, that we are fortunate because we have each other and so many other people that we connect to, because when we speak out publicly, people find us and they reach out to us. And the whole reason we have a podcast is because we were just getting on a Zoom call to talk over some details about something, and we were all like, this is amazing. We needed each other. And we thought, if we need each other, what about all of you? Because we hear from so many readers who are alone, who are feeling isolated, alienated. They don't have that community, and we have the fortunate circumstance that wherever we go, people know who we are. And sometimes that's bad, but usually that's good. Because then they come and we strengthen each other. We do carry each other. I can't believe I get to quote Bono up here. But we do. And so the reason we are here with you today is because we need strength from you. Mm-hmm. And this connection is so important. And the musicians have reminded us that we have beauty and goodness and truth on our side, and we have to remind ourselves that, and we have to tap into that. And history teaches us that a small number of people who borrow that courage can do remarkable things. And we are here to testify to that.
Amen. I'm going to jump in real quick. Thank you. Yeah.
Can I just say to my friend real quickly, the idea of a rogue Calvinist is going to keep me up tonight.
That's great. This is a good T-shirt material, right? So I do want to remind you to go ahead and, if you have questions, we're going to take questions in about 12 minutes. So if you want to go ahead and text those, the number's in your program. In case you don't have a program, it is 209-713-0462. That is 209-713-0462. One thing that's kind of been on my mind is I'm so glad to hear the hope message, 'cause I feel like that's what I often need. I swim in my day job in a bunch of public opinion numbers, right? I'm the most dangerous person to invite to a cocktail party because I do public opinion on religion, culture, and politics, right? So that's mostly what I talk about in these stages. But and as someone who grew up in the church, it's easy to get jaded looking at the numbers all the time. There are moments, and this year and this week, we just released our last pre-election poll, looking at the state of play. What are people thinking? What are people, kind of believing in? What are they supporting? And I got to tell you, it broke my heart. And I say that as someone particularly who cares about the church and who cares about Christian witness, right, in public spaces. And so we released this new batch of stuff. And so, we've known for a while that the couple numbers on Christian nationalism, right? So when we measure Christian nationalism, sociologically speaking, we find that about 3 in 10 Americans, right, are those who are supportive of Christian nationalism. And these are attitudes like the U.S. should declare itself a Christian nation. U.S. laws should be based on the Bible. Christians should exercise dominion over all areas of American society. If we move away from our Christian foundations, we won't have a country anymore. To be American, to be truly American, one must be Christian, right? These kinds of attitudes. So people who believe those attitudes, it makes up about 3 in 10 Americans. So the good news is, right, that 2/3, there's more of us than there are of them. 2/3 of Americans reject that worldview. But it's really challenging, and particularly I'm looking out, and I can see most people look like me in this room, and where it's particularly challenging is among white Christians, right? White Christians look different on these measures than other people do. And I'm going to give you just a couple of numbers here because I think it tells you what the real challenge is before us today on these measures. So it's 3 in 10, right? But it is among my people, white evangelical Protestants, right, that are predominantly in the South, in the Midwest, it's 2/3. Right, who had this view. And when you boil all that down, and one way I've talked about it is this fundamental kind of contest between two visions of who the country is of, by, and for. Right? Is the country a kind of promised land for European Christians? That's the Christian nationalist vision. Right? Or is it a pluralistic democracy? Right, where everybody stands on equal footing before the law, regardless of race, regardless of religion. We've already heard Dred Scott, right, where there was nope, no standing, right? Even in our own Constitution, right, we see this, right? I just noticed I passed Indian School Road here. There's a Navajo reservation, nearby, and our Constitution excludes Indians, right, explicitly, right, from all the rights and privileges, right? In the thing, we all know it's a very, very long struggle, but it's 2/3 of white evangelical Protestants that do that. But you might be surprised to know that it's nearly half of white Catholics, right, who also share this view. And among white mainline Protestants, that's the Methodists, the Episcopalians, Presbyterians, it's lower, but it's more than 1/3. It's 36%. Right, even the so-called progressive or liberal side of white, non-Hispanic Protestant, and that is only the sort of part of it where I really despaired, and we there are certain kind of questions that I've had to write as a sociologist for a public opinion survey that are in themselves an indictment of where we are. So I found out that we had to write a question to ask about whether people thought that immigrants were poisoning the blood of our country. I had to write a question to find out whether Americans today were going to support militarized encampments for immigrants. Today, that we actually needed to know, like, where Americans were on these questions. So I'm going to give you a couple of numbers here. I also had to write a question about whether Americans thought that immigrants coming to the country today were replacing our culture and background, right? The kind of so-called Great Replacement theory that has a very long white supremacist history. So this this kind of toxic cocktail of Christian nationalism and nativism, like racism and nativism and white supremacy, this kind of toxic cocktail. So on the question of whether immigrants are replacing our culture, it's white evangelicals 62%, right, believe that. White Catholics 44%, white mainline Protestants 41%, 4 in 10. On the question of whether we should set up militarized encampments, right, and to deport immigrants who are in the country illegally and set up militarized encampments with the U.S. military, white evangelical Protestants 75%. White Catholics 61%. White mainline Protestants 58%. And on this absolutely question that is ripped straight from the pages of Mein Kampf, poisoning the blood, right, of our country. White evangelical Protestants, again, my people, 60% agree. White Catholics, nearly half, 46%. And white mainline Protestants, again, 36%, right? 1 in 3, more than 1 in 3. They're like, we have got some work to do, right, to kind of think about like how we've gotten to this place, right, where this vision, it's very, very old, right, this vision of white Christian nationalism that is about this idea of this country as a promised land for European Christians, and that's it. Everybody else here is on some other stance. So I kind of just want to bring that in the space. It's kind of where I'm at and where I'm really wrestling with, because we just released these numbers this week, and it's one thing to kind of put them up on a PowerPoint and you watch the little bars kind of slide across the screen, right? But to realize how many millions of people that those views represent, right? And then we really have a job to do to kind of stand up again and kind of say, no, here's another view, right? And this view is Christian, right? And it's not just that view. This view is Christian, and this view is actually supportive of all of our brothers and sisters in the country.
So I was at the release of this data, and I was sitting in this crowd. It was about 125, 150 people at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. So these are high-powered journalists and think tank leaders and all these people in very fancy clothes that you probably don't even have in your closet anymore because you live in Arizona. And everybody's faces just went from being, oh, this is great, we're here with Robbie, we can't wait to celebrate, this new report, and people were really just down when they left. But I want to thank you so much for bringing up the issue of nativism, and it points to something that I think is a really important thing for us to recognize. You ask, how does this happen? How do we get here? And I think it's because there's a conflict in the nature of truth and how we tell stories about history and identity and these different things. And so when you bring up nativism, I think of this event that happened in 1996. And then I was working as a syndicated columnist for the New York Times. And so I was going around, I was covering all of these different events about what we then called the religious right. And so I was at a Pat Buchanan rally in Santa Barbara County, California. And we went into this gym. It was packed with all these people, and that was, I don't know if you remember this or not about Pat Buchanan, but he was the first person to make a political campaign out of Build the Wall and also sending people back. It was a very nativist campaign. And so I'm not talking, this is a past thing. I'm reporting history. I'm not campaigning for or against Pat Buchanan at this point. But so I was at this rally, and I'm taking all these notes, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to write on it, when I noticed that in the back of the auditorium there was a group of who looked to me to be people from the local Chumash tribe, which is the native tribe in that part of California. And sure enough, I asked somebody, it was a group of Chumash elders who had come to this thing with Pat Buchanan. And so Pat's up there, and he's doing his build the wall, and he's doing this thing and that thing, and he's getting the crowd all stirred up, when finally he just shouted at the top of his lungs, "America is for the Native Americans!" By which, of course, he meant Italian guys like himself, or Irish Catholic guys, whatever he was. And so all of a sudden, the crowd broke out in all these cheers. And I noticed where the cheers were coming from. They were coming from the Chumash elders in the back. Right. And that really stirred up Pat. And so then he went on with it. And he was going, yes, only Native Americans should be full citizens. And they kept cheering and cheering and cheering. And Pat just played right into it. And I stood there. I was laughing so hard I couldn't even think anymore. And finally, what occurred to me is that basically there was a conflict of history. There was a conflict of stories that was present in that room, and that Pat, Irish Catholic immigrant family, had believed a particular set of lies, half-truths and deceptions about the nature of America and the nature of immigration, the nature of citizenship. And meanwhile, the Chumash, of course, my mom always used to say that around here too. She would say, it's their land. We're just a bunch of white people sitting here, and we should be glad that they don't come after us. She was very honest about that when we moved here. And yet their story was honest. I mean, they are the Native Americans in Santa Barbara County, and Pat was the interloper, and so were we. And so I think just about that, and it's the one thing I want to read, and then I get to pass on to Jamar. This is a quote from someone else from history that we could learn from. And this comes from a person who did a lot of his writing around the rise of Nazism, and that is Karl Barth, great European theologian of the middle part of the 20th century. The church knows that all totalities of the world and society, and also of the state, are actually false gods, and therefore lies. In the end, you don't have to be afraid of lies. Lies don't have any legs to stand on, and in the church, one can know that. Whenever the church, however, takes these lies seriously, then it is lost. It is lost. With all calmness and in all peace, the church must treat these stories as lies. And the more that the church lives in all humility and knows that we too are only human, and there will also be lies within us, then it will also know all the more surely that God sits in governance against the lies that are in us and over and against the lies of the world and even the lies in the state. And in that case, the church, regardless of the circumstances, no matter how entangled and difficult the situation, remains at its task and knows itself to be forbidden to fear the future, because its future is the Lord. And He, not the totalitarian state, is the heart of the church.
It strikes me that part of what's difficult about this moment is that broad swaths of the church in the United States have what I call a thin political theology. A thin political theology as opposed to a thick political theology. A thin political theology is single issue voting, traffics in both sidesism, both sides are equally bad, both sides are equally corrupt. Say there's only one true Christian party, there's only one true Christian way to vote. And whether you subscribe to that or not, generations of Christians have been practically force-fed this narrative. So that when we get to a moment like this, a moment that I characterize as uncertainty, but also a moment where there's great fear and even anxiety, there are broad swaths of the church that are ill-equipped to handle it. And I'll give you an example. I'm doing this online event this coming Tuesday, and I posted about it on Instagram, and part of what I posted was, hey, I know we're all feeling a bit of fear and anxiety in this moment. And there were several comments under that post that said, don't be afraid, Jamar, you shouldn't be scared, trust in the Lord, we've got this, right? And like, yeah, but... I mean, when somebody takes a feeling that you have and says, don't feel that way, it's like a slap in the face. And I think that's actually that thin political theology coming out, that we don't know how to respond to fear and uncertainty and anxiety except say, don't feel that way. Trusting God's got this. And true enough, in the Bible it says, don't be anxious about anything. But in everything, by prayer and petition, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. But see, I like what God does here. God says, don't be anxious, but he doesn't just leave it there. Figure it out yourself. Don't be anxious. Come to me in prayer. Tell it to me. God doesn't say you shouldn't feel that way. God says, bring it to me. And so I think in this moment, like it's human to have some fear. It's human to have some anxiety. And quite honestly, I don't know how you don't have some fear and anxiety if you're paying attention. I'm real concerned about people who don't feel that right now. Because I'm like, are you watching? Like, please. So anyway, I say that because I just like, if you're feeling that and then you're feeling some sort of pressure from others to say, oh, don't worry about it, don't be afraid, I think that's okay. And I also think it's okay to be reminded that we have a place for that fear and anxiety, a place to direct it and put it. But it's also a natural response to our times.
So this is the Faith and Democracy Tour. And I have to confess that every once in a while I find this, I have this sense of like, wait, what am I doing here? I'm not a scholar of democracy per se. I stumbled into this all by asking some questions about evangelical masculinity. It started innocent enough. And I started digging, and I thought, ooh, what is this? And this doesn't look very biblical. And where did this come from? And what does this lead to? And as I was digging into the historical sources that presented a Christianity that was all about hierarchy and submission, and it was about order and coercion and power, grasping power. And I thought, this is not biblical. And sure enough, they didn't actually quote a lot of Bible verses when they were writing about this warrior masculinity, right? They liked the mythical warriors. They loved Mel Gibson's William Wallace, big star in that world. They liked John Wayne. They liked soldiers and fighters, right? And the Jesus of the Gospels wasn't really their guy unless they transformed him into a warrior Christ who would fight all of their battles and do their bidding. And I started to think, wow, what I'm uncovering, they love to talk about authority, power, submission. I thought, if I didn't know any better, this sounds almost authoritarian. I didn't know what to do with that. So I just described what I saw. And my very first article that I wrote on what would become Jesus and John Wayne was published in January 2016. Or 2017, sorry, January 2017. You can remember what was going on then. There was an inauguration. And I wrote on evangelical masculinity and militarism. And that thing went viral. And I got a lot of comments from evangelical men saying, exactly this. Yes, this is, I saw this. I experienced this. This is exactly right. But I got one letter, one email that came from a scholar of Nazi propaganda. And he said, did you know that all these quotes that you included in there could have been taken from the rhetoric of Nazi Christians? He's like, did you know that? And I was like, yeah, I did, actually. My outside field in graduate school was 20th century Germany with an emphasis on the German Christian movement. And so like, this question, like, if you're not nervous, are you paying attention? Because some of us have had eyes to see. And some of us see these dynamics, and but we didn't quite know how to. Can I say this? Can I, like, will anybody believe me, or am I just going to be, you know, like laughed off the stage, or, you know, alarmist? And then fast forward, people are saying the quiet parts out loud, right? And they are very clear, calling out democracy as idolatry. The Bible doesn't use the word or it doesn't use the word democracy. Okay, fair, but right, but and there are explicit movements right now that are demonizing democracy and that are pushing Christian nationalism. And I'm afraid that much of the American church is not ready for that, is not aware of how much the landscape has changed. And so much of what we do is call out the dangers, but we also want to point to a Christian case for democracy. And as Robbie already said, Christians have not always led the charge on this front, and we acknowledge that and we lament that. At the same time, we want to stake a claim on a Christian theology for democracy. Several months ago, I was asked to join a drafting team, and we came up with a statement on faith and democracy, Christian faith and democracy. And you can find it at faithanddemocracy.net. Check it out. Lots of good thinking went into that. We had Protestant scholars, we had Catholic scholars, Orthodox scholars. We spent almost 9 months searching the scriptures, drawing on our theological traditions to make a Christian case for democracy. We talk about the image of God, Imago Dei, and the dignity of all people. We talk about the biblical mandate to love our neighbors as ourselves, and so importantly, to love our enemies. Christian nationalism and reactionary politics thrives on this us versus them mentality, on this sense of embattlement, on this sense of threat, seeing your neighbor as your enemy and wanting to preemptively destroy that enemy before they come for you. This is the rhetoric that you will hear over and over again, and it is thoroughly anti-Christian. It is false, and it is anti-Christian, because guess what we are told? We are to love even our enemies. That is what it is to follow Christ. We make a case based on image of God, loving neighbor, loving enemies, but I've already been outed here as a Calvinist, so I'm just going to say it. We also make a case based on sin. Sin. Because as Christians, we do not believe that sin is only like some of us, meaning them, that those guys out there are sinful and we have to protect our country from them. We believe that each and every one of us has that capacity for sin and pride and selfishness. And what democracy does is it kind of spreads out the vices and offers these checks and balances and guardrails. Reinhold Niebuhr has this powerful quote that men's capacity for justice makes democracy possible, and men's capacity for injustice makes democracy necessary. And we talk in that statement about truth. We have to tell the truth. And we talk about hope, not fear. And so we are here not just to spread the alarm that we all need to be paying attention and we all need to be acting now, right now, as in this moment and 2 weeks from now. And we also have a strong tradition on which to draw. We have a theology of democracy and a theology of hope.
Thanks, Kristen.
Amen.
Yes. All right, we're going to turn to some questions now, but I do want to say that we have at least scrambled. We've used the word abomination. We've talked about sin. We've quoted some Bible verses. So we have scrambled the wires a little bit tonight already. So Sean's got some questions coming in. Again, the text number's up here on the wall if you want to text them in. So Sean, take it away.
Thank you, Robbie.
And we'll just kind of take them. We won't have to kind of go down the line, right? Well, yeah.
We have a rich supply of questions this evening.
Nice.
And so one recurring theme that's been along these lines. As Christians, how do we move forward toward reconciliation within our divided communities? And a number of folks pointed out that Arizona is kind of a hotbed for Christian nationalism.
I actually asked Robbie what the numbers were for Arizona, and believe it or not, Arizona is pretty much right on the national number. 27% of Arizonans fit the definition of Christian nationalism that Robbie presented earlier. So I just want to say that. So I know it's really easy to think while you're here that it's like worse than everywhere else, or sort of out of control. You're actually pretty representative of the national sample in the state.
And I think it probably feels tense in a state like Arizona because you have both groups, and it's a swing state, politically and all of that. And I actually compare it to the Civil War. There were border states, and there were states that had slavery but remained in the Union, like where I live in Kentucky. And in those places, I actually feel like the tension is higher because there's a bit of a crisis of identity. Whereas I lived in Mississippi, and it was pretty clear where they stood in a lot of cases. So there's that tension still. And then to the question, how do we bring about reconciliation? Look, Jesus talked about the truth dividing like a sword. And sometimes I think we preoccupy ourselves too much with trying to persuade people and get them to this other side. And I recognize it's tender because for a lot of folks, particularly white folks, this is in your family. This is a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, right? And so you love them. And there is that tension where it's this person who's close to you and familiar, and you love the person they are, but these beliefs, where they're getting their news, the things they're saying about people of color and other folks, I wish they would just, to which I say, your best tool is your testimony. It's your lived witness of how you love them and others, especially the others they may want to demonize. And then also your testimony to them about why do you believe what you believe. If you try to trot out these very persuasive statistics that Robbie has given us, they're inoculated against that from the news they hear and the voices they're listening to. But they do care about you and your story. Now, they may not agree, it may not be persuasive, but I would say get real good at telling people why you give a darn. What was it in your story? Was it a personal relationship that you had? Was it, marrying someone, or now you have grandkids who are, it's in your family now, or it was a book you read? Get really good at sharing about that. And it's a little bit harder to argue with your own experience. And then lastly, I say, my philosophy is the Motel 6 philosophy. Back in the day, they used to have these commercials that ended Motel 6. We'll keep the light on for you. And that's my attitude toward these folks, right? Like, there's so much arrogance and certainty there, you're not going to get a word in edgewise. But if anyone does come to you with humility, if anyone does come to you with genuine curiosity, even though they may be far down this rabbit hole of white Christian nationalism, I will always have the conversation. I will always leave the light on for you.
Jamar, you touched on probably 10 very specific questions about family relationships, so thank you. A follow-up that also came into the questions for the panel, is it worth possibly ending familial or other relationships over?
Well, that's one of those questions that only you can really decide on a case-by-case kind of relationship. The case for stepping out of a relationship is if one feels endangered in some way, shape, or form, or if you think that continuing the conversation that you're having might endanger another. And so that's the place where I always will draw a line. And this is particularly, this is hard for women, you know. Sometimes in a public space, I'm sure Jamar feels this too as an African American man. There are spaces and conversations where all of a sudden you just know that you're not safe. And to me, those are the places that relationship, if you have one, or just pure need to take care of yourself, need to be overwhelming concern. So safety is that line for me, and that can move around, you know, depending upon the situation, the people you're with.
Another question for the panel: could you comment briefly on the beloved community of Dr. King and how this applies today to these issues that we are discussing right now?
Can I talk about it? Because I just wrote about it.
Yeah. All yours.
Because in my new book, The Spirit of Justice, there's a whole chapter called Beyond the Quotable King.
Yeah.
We all have these little sound bites of King, and yet he was a prolific speaker, obviously, more than just the I Have a Dream speech. And by the way, even in the I Have a Dream speech, it's very subversive. Read the beginning, and not just the part about not the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And also, you know, his views on militarism and war, his views on economics and poverty. But to that question of the beloved community, the last chapter of the book talks about 4 virtues that I think tie together these over 50 people who I profile in the book across 4 centuries of U.S. history. Those 4 virtues are faith, courage, resilience, and imagination. So when I think of the beloved community, that is an act of theological imagination. Or even the phrase, I have a dream. So what's happening is, as people of faith, we describe in truth the current reality, which is also often a grim picture. But we also have a constructive vision of what could be, an imagination of what might be, if we enact these things. And I think that is critically important right now, that we have a clear picture of a society, of a nation that is healthy, that honors and loves and respects everyone, as well as what churches look like when they live that out. Here's your book recommendation for the night yet again. If you want to read more about the beloved community, read King's last book. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? Where do we go from here? And he lays out what he means by beloved community. But the point here is, it is an act of theological imagination, and it is so important because oppression suppresses imagination. Because you can only be concerned about survival, about what's happening right now. And so what we need to enact justice is this theological imagination that says, what does a beloved community look like? What does that dream community look like? And so I think it's very profound all the time, but especially in these times of uncertainty.
I'm going to add one quick caveat to this. So, whenever I've been in predominantly white Christian circles and we end up talking about things like reconciliation and previous question, beloved community, I do find that one of the things that white Christians and I think particularly progressive white Christians want to reach for that vision of that end vision of community, and we'll put our arms around each other and we'll all be reconciled, and just open your jacket there. Justice takes sides, right? The thing for King, the beloved community never came without justice, right? And I think for white Christians, there's a pathway, we want to get so quickly to that mountaintop of reconciliation, right, where we all feel better, but we forget that there is no path to that mountain of reconciliation that doesn't go through the valley of truth telling and repair.
That's good.
Right? And we want to skip the truth telling and repair part, and that's, I think, the harder part for us. And one quick quip, I know we're running short of time, I want to make sure we get to another question, but if there's one thing I would recommend to progressive, or really any predominantly white Christian space, is that you stop reading King's speech, with the kind of we'll all, kind of hold hands together and that kind of thing, and you read Letter from Birmingham Jail, right? No more mountaintop, Letter from Birmingham Jail, because there's what he has to say about where the white Christian church really was, right? And a kind of challenge that has about justice, and the prerequisite to getting to the beloved community is that piece.
Amen.
Yeah.
We have time for one final question, and this I think everybody will probably want to participate. How do we operate more out of love than fear, out of hope rather than hopelessness, and how do we have faith in the midst of the fury?
There's a poet in it says,
I think we have to remember that we are not called to win. And that's not what I want to say, and probably not what you want to hear right now. But part of the problem with Christian nationalism is the demand to win, and to win at all costs. But what do you end up winning? Right? And we are called to be faithful, not to get our way, and not to mandate that others do what we think they ought to do. We can use our powers of persuasion, and we can model, and there's all sorts of things that we can do, but we cannot coerce our way to the kind of victory that we are seeking. And I think that, and this is something Jamar might have more to say on, that white folks tend to get weary quickly, right? I'm one of them. And get discouraged quickly because, man, we've been working hard and things aren't going our way. Right? And so where do we turn to? What do we draw on? What is the source of our strength, of our resilience? What does it mean to be faithful? Right? What does it mean to be faithful? And I know for some of us, we've been setting our sights on November 5. Some of us have for the last 4 years, looking ahead to this day. It's not the end of anything. It could be the beginning of something else entirely. But our call to obedience, to do justice, to love kindness, our call to be courageous does not end November 5. Right? Yeah. And so we need the spiritual strength, the historical rootedness, the community of saints to remind us of these things, because it might be scary. We might be afraid. But we have to, as has already been said, we have to borrow that courage. Yeah, what do you guys have to say?
I don't want to go after Jamar.
Oh, come on.
So Jamar, we're probably close to time, right? Yeah. So Jamar, you want to take us home, Jamar?
I do. I want to say something, though.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Right,
but I just don't want to go after
him.
Jamar.
Okay, I got it.
Right.
Funny.
And that is the question: is how to hold yourself to faith, hope, and love, essentially in these kinds of times. And there is, I can tell you exactly what I do here. I'm a historian, and when I used to teach at the university level, one of the things I would do is I teach this long church history class, and then I would say at the end of the church history class, you've studied church history for 13 weeks, now go out and make it, to my students. And that was, what I was trying to do with that was always give my students this sort of longer vision, is that the stories of the past stretch into the future. And that is something that's really important to me, is that we're part of this. We really are part of a long arc of history. King was absolutely right. It's long, the arc of history is long. And then it was after I started teaching that I had a baby when I was almost 40. And it did not make me a better human being. Or a more valuable citizen, I can tell you that.
You just
But
gotta
I have
tiptoe
this-
right up there.
I have this beautiful daughter who is now 27 years old, and her whole life has been spent in this crisis. And somehow, when she was little, I thought to myself, whatever history it is that I'm making with my life, it includes her. And that I want to live in such a way that her life is going to be in a better America. And so I always had this vision of the fact that I'm really doing all of this for my daughter. And when things got really intense, I would say in the last 9 or 10 years, it's been just, that's the thing that's really held my feet to it, is how can I create the best world and live the best way as her mother to move things ahead. And so now we have this sort of joke in the house is when I'm gone, and maybe this will happen for you when your kids get a little bit older, but I'll see the text threads that are going in the family, and Richard will say, oh, sorry, Mom's out of town right now, she can't help you with XYZ. And then my daughter will say, oh yeah, she's off fighting fascism. And if that's the way that my 27-year-old daughter remembers her mother, who was born, who gave birth when she was almost 40, so she's going to live a lot longer than me. I hope. If that's the way she remembers me, that's the way I want to be remembered. And so that's what I ask you all to think about. Not about your own fears, and not about your own failures, and not about your own shortcomings, but how is it that you want your children and your grandchildren to tell the story of your life right now and how you responded in these days? Because guess what? When we're all gone, they will tell the story.
Yeah. Amen.
And they're either going to call you a coward or a person who sat on the fence, or they're going to say, Mom was out there fighting fascism. Sure, she missed some soccer games, but she stood up when it mattered. Yeah. And that's I think you all want that.
All right, Jamar.
I just go back to this verse, Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Just like that Bible verse about fear and anxiety, where God doesn't just give us that command, God attaches a promise to it. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for I will be with you wherever you go. My confession to you this evening is I am very selfish in this justice work. Because what I find in this justice work is that as I pursue justice, I get more of Jesus. Are we too, advanced and intelligent and sure of ourselves that we can't admit that we need Jesus? I hope not. What I love about that verse is it attaches a promise, for I will be with you wherever you go. And I can tell you from personal experience, there is a closeness with Jesus that you will not experience until you have followed the path of justice, just like Jesus did. Jesus said, take up your cross, follow me. But see, here's the good part. In the Old Testament, there was this promise, for I will be with you wherever you go. But look what happens in the New Testament. There was this baby that was born. And they called this baby Emmanuel, which means what? God with us. Do you see what God did? He took that promise, those words, and he made those words flesh in the form of Jesus, who lived the way we're all supposed to live. Because what I hear behind that question is, how in the midst of an unjust society can we live like Jesus? It's by following Jesus. The command was be strong and courageous, but the promise is I'll be with you wherever you go. And the seal on that promise is the word becomes flesh in the form of Emmanuel, God with us. Do you believe God is with you? Do you believe that when you follow the path of justice, you're following the path of Jesus? And when you pursue justice, that you can lose all kind of things. Remember that verse where it says, Jesus, your mother and your sisters and brothers are looking for you. And Jesus said, who are my mother and sisters and brothers? Whoever does the will of the Father in heaven. Guess who's your mother and your sister and your brother in this room? Who's ever doing the will of God. So you may lose family, you may lose friends, you may lose money, you may lose jobs. But what does it profit us to gain the world and lose our souls? So how can you live like Jesus in the midst of an unjust world? You believe that promise that God is with you. And then, oh, God is so good. Because as soon as you take that little step of faith, that little risk to step up and stand up for truth and righteousness and justice and to do mercy and to love kindness and to walk humbly with God, you know what God does? He says, I'm right there with you. And he gives you this sweet experience of God's presence that you cannot get enough of. And that's what keeps you going. Amen.
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 All right. All right, Lord.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, friends. So our friends are going to take us home here.
Thanks. Oh, wow.
What we needed you.
So I know we're running late. I just don't.
I knew this was going to be great, and it was even greater than I expected. And I thank you so much. I'm so honored to have been able to sing at this event tonight. I want to sing a hymn that was written by Elizabeth Prentice, who lived in the mid-1800s, and she had a book called Stepping Heavenward that I loved. I think she only wrote 2 hymns, and the other one's no good. That's why I always do this one. More love to thee, O Christ, more love to thee. Hear thou the prayer I make on bended knee. This is my earnest plea, more love, O Christ, to thee. more love to thee, more love to thee, more love to thee, more love to thee. Once earthly joy I craved, sought peace and rest. Now thee alone I seek, give what is best. This all my prayer shall be, more love, O Christ, to thee, more love to thee, more love to thee, more love to thee, more love to thee. Then shall my latest breath whisper thy praise. This be the parting cry my heart shall raise. Still all my prayer shall be, more love, O Christ, to thee, more love to thee, more love to thee, more love to thee, more love to thee.
Okay, I'm gonna try something. This wasn't a part of the plan, but I'm feeling courageous this evening. Are you guys feeling courageous? Good. It could be a huge mistake, but hopefully, hopefully not. This is a song. I'm in a band, in a girl band called Paper Horses, with my friends Sandra McCracken and Leslie Jordan and Jess Ray. And we've been really loving writing songs together. We wrote this one, Leslie had this old book of poems and hymns, kind of sacred text. And there was this text that said, "The world is getting better every day." And we were like, is it though? Are we sure about that? And I'm not sure. But then we kind of talked about it and we're like, well, in what way could we say that's true? And somehow Mr. Rogers came up, of course. And then we were like, remember that quote that was kind of has gone around sometimes, where Fred is talking about his mother, and he says, whenever anything would happen on the news, like when anything scary happens on the news, like my mother would say, look for the helpers. There's always someone helping. And so we kind of thought, yes, like look for the helpers, and kind of turn that into this prayer of like, Lord, let us be the helpers. Let us always be ones looking. And it was such an encouragement listening to this courageous conversation tonight. And these are 4 helpers you have up here. And then just looking at this room, and we were talking even just moments ago, like all of you and the spirit in this room of like everyone's leaning in. And I feel like all of you out there are helpers. You're ones who are like, okay, what can we do? And think about it. If all of us are leaning in like that, I'm just leaving tonight with way more hope than when I came in. So I hope you're feeling that way too. I've never done this song without my 3 friends, so I don't know what's going to happen. But we're going to get through it. The world is getting better. I heard the prophet say, the light is shining brighter in one luminous ray. And though deceivers murmur and turn the other way, yet still the world grows better every day. I said, hey man, it's foolish holding on to hope. From here it seems we're dangling from an old and fraying rope. Where do you find the confidence in these dark times to say the world is getting brighter every day? He said, I look for the helpers. I look for the helpers. Who's running to the fire, head first into the fray? Who turns to face the suffering and doesn't look away when others run for cover? Who's brave enough to stay? The world is full of helpers every day. You want to sing it with me? Sing. I look for the helper. I look for the helper. Oh, let me be a helper in the hour of need. When trouble comes a-calling, oh Lord, where will I be? There's saints who gone ahead of us, some coming up behind. And Lord willing, I'll be standing in that line. Well, I look for the helpers. Yeah, y'all sound great. Sing it now. I look for the helpers. Oh, I look for the helpers. I look for the helpers.
I want to thank the organizers again for having us come and be a part of this. A beautiful day. This one started coming together back when I was still a teenager. Back when you could entertain lofty thoughts like this, you know. It speaks to hope, you know. I love what was said about hope today, you know. I look at hope as a superpower, you know. A gentleman by the name of Eric Clapton made this song famous, but it started a different way. I'd I'd like to sing it the way it started, you know, at least a part of it. Wake up, oh heart of mine, to the state of the world before you. You know we ain't got much time to do the things that we must do. If you listen, you can hear a change. It's riding on the wind like a holiday. And I hope you got your ticket straight, yeah. When the love train comes your way. If you don't know where we're going, baby, take these hands and I'll show you where. If you run a little short on faith, I still believe we can make it there, where we might change the world. And I could be the sunlight in your universe. And you might think that love is something good. Maybe if I could change the world. And it sort of morphed into this version. If I could be king, even for one day, I'd take you as my queen. I'd have it no other way. And this love of ours would rule in this kingdom we have made. Till then I'll be a fool, wishing for the day that I could change the world. I would be the sunlight in your universe, and you would think my love was something good. Baby, if I could, I would change the world. Baby, if I could, I would change the world. Thank you so much. And if you would, we'd like to do one more song, but we'd like to do this song with you. Something we're all familiar with. I think we said the key was F, maybe?
Y'all want to stand up for this one? And you got hymnals. You know, we're in this lovely Methodist church. You got those Methodist hymnals. You don't need. You might not need to use them, but we're gonna sing. What are we gonna sing, Tommy?
This one, this one we all know. A little bit of Amazing Grace, maybe?
That's right. If you need a little help with the lyrics, it's on 378 there in your hymnals. That's fun to say, isn't it? 378. And we'll do verse, for those of you who like to know what's coming, we're doing 1, 2, 3, and 6. How about that?
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
through many dangerous toils, through many dangers, toils and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home.
We've been there.
When we've been there,
When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
thank you so much.
Fernando, Taylor, Timmy or Tommy? Tommy.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you so very much. And friends, Kristen, Jamar, Diana, and Robert, thank you so much. Now, he went on to preaching, but if you want to hear Jamar's sermon, Dayspring's service this morning is archived. Friends, we hope that you will find your way over to the fellowship hall. David has a special presentation for you. We hope you'll find your way over to the fellowship hall where there will be book signing. Books are available for purchase. And also, get this, if you fill out a survey, I didn't do anything. You get a $10 voucher for the food trucks out there. So fill out those surveys so you can get that voucher. Jamar, I couldn't help but think of something John Dominic Crossan says. When you talked about justice, he says WWJD stands for What Would Justice Demand? Justice and Jesus go hand in hand, brother. Thank you.
And it says here on my paper that I'm supposed to do a benediction, but there's no flippin' way I am going to do a benediction when there is a real pro in the building. So let's stand and join together as Jamar sends us out with these words of blessing and a charge to get ourselves busy.
Hear God's word to you. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for I am with you wherever you go. Go in peace.
Thank you. Tacos to your right, free books to your left. Go, go, go. Hey, Tom. Great.